Hello music lovers of the world, welcome to episode 41 of What Makes This Song Special. The show where every week I take a different song, I talk about why it's a special song to me, what does it remind me of in my life, a little story to go along with it. I'll talk a wee bit about the singer's technique, and then I'll follow up with a part 2 of my own cover version of the song. Before I start this week's story, I'd just like to say thank you to all the new subscribers. Mr. G Just Juve, who I'm a huge fan of, who has an amazing YouTube channel of his own talking about Juventus Football Club. I wore this especially today just to thank the new subscribers. He got about 15 new Juve fans to follow me last night on his show, so very much appreciated, G Just Juve. Check his channel out if you're into football, into Juventus Football Club. So yeah, I hope everybody who's tuning in for the first time enjoys this little story. So yeah, this week I'm going to go back to around about summer, end of summer, beginning of autumn 1997, long time ago now. And me and my mate Michael Oakley, who I've mentioned a few times on the show already, we were gigging under the name Morph. We were doing our first few gigs. Morph, it was MORF, which was our initials stuck together. A very original band name. We were a duo. He played keys, I played guitar. We both sang. It probably wasn't really the kind of music that I was really into at that time. It just had a kind of 80s pop duo vibe to it. You know, think Pet Shop Boys, Erasure, which was definitely more Mike's influence than it was mine. And I was probably trying to pull it into more of a sort of Simon and Garfunkel type direction, or even maybe hoping that one day we would get a drummer and turn it into like a trio, like the Police or something, or even pull in a bass player and a drummer and turn it into an actual kind of live band. But we played along to like backing tracks with live instruments and vocals, and it was a pretty unique sound for, I think, for our age group. Certainly at that time it was cool. Anyway, I didn't dislike it, even though it wasn't maybe the type of music that I listened to. I loved it. I absolutely loved being part of it. It was a fresh, exciting experience for both of us, and we'd obtained some fake IDs, played in some bars and pubs long before our friends and peers had ever dreamed of stepping inside a pub or a bar. We'd managed to play some gigs at that point, so that was quite cool as well. I had the feeling that we were doing something different to everyone else. We were on the road less travelled. We were special, you know, that type of thing. And the comments and you know, plaudits we were getting from people after gigs when they heard our demos and things like that was really positive. And there was a real immature belief around our school friends that we were minutes away from becoming the next big thing, you know, right on to top of the pops. I suppose inevitably, like, some of that positivity had fed our own egos. You know, I think at that point we really were full of our own self-importance. We thought, you know, we're definitely going to make it. We're so good, you know. The 30 people that came to the last gig all thought we were great. We must be great. And we were always we would watch other unsigned bands and who were maybe even older than us, and we were always unimpressed. You know, they weren't as good as us, according to us. And of course, I think the thing that always came back to us, I think the reason we thought we were so good at that time was because, one, we wrote our own songs when a lot of other bands were kind of just mainly doing covers. We did a couple of covers, but it was mainly songs that we were writing ourselves. Mainly Michael at that point. I'd written a couple, but Michael wrote more of the songs than I did back then. And number two, me and Mike could both really sing. You know, we could both sing well. And that was quite it was a rarity, I suppose, for people round about our age in the unsigned scene. And it is strange that we'd been best friends since primary school. We had this inseparable friendship, and yet we never really realised that we both were very musical until we'd been friends already for a good few years. Usually become friends with other musicians because you have that common ground to draw upon as a lead into, you know, conversations and things like that. But we really never started singing and playing music together until probably a couple of years into high school, even though we'd been friends since, you know, early primary school. So Mike definitely had the guts to get up and sing long before I did, a couple of years before I did, and then a couple of years later I plucked up the courage, something that I speak about in the first ever episode of this series. What makes this song special? I almost forgot the name of my own series there. What makes this song special? Episode 1, where I did the Too Much Love Will Kill You by Queen cover. I talk a lot about the kind of real anxiety I had with the idea of performance. But yeah, Michael, he was a couple of years before me. He had the guts before I did. But by this point we were 15, and yeah, I think I suppose it's an incredible coincidence that we became friends, and then later realised that we were, both into the same things, as opposed to the other way around. But yeah, we'd got to that point where we were playing some gigs together. We were both singing, we were playing our instruments, and I can't remember how many gigs we'd done by this point, but we'd been offered the chance to do this little gig / battle of the bands type thing at a local church hall. I think it was Stampoland Church Hall, I think it was called. And a few pals and folks from around about the area, from maybe other towns and things around the area, had always who had bands, were all getting involved in this gig. I can't remember how many bands were playing, but there were a good few different acts playing that night, or throughout. It was like maybe a Saturday afternoon into the night, and of course Morph. We had the headline position on the bill, and we turned up for the sound check in the afternoon. And it just felt really cool. It was like this really very scaled down version of something we'd seen our idols do at big gigs on TV. We'd watched the Live Aid VHS back then and things like that, or the Freddie Mercury tribute concert and those types of things. We've got all these different bands backstage all chatting about each other, getting ready for a gig where they're all going to perform, which just felt really exciting, and nerve-wracking, like really nerve-wracking, but very exciting, being there and talking to other bands. And it's always strange talking to other bands, like before these types of events, which I've played a few of over the years, because everyone's really nice to each other. We're all really complimentary of each other's songs and each other's sound, the playing ability. We'll all be like, oh, your voice was fantastic there, and oh wow, your guitar playing is wonderful, and all that stuff. And deep down, there's that wee competitive barrier there somewhere too. I think everybody feels like that. You want them to be shit. You don't want them to be good. You want them to really suck so that you look as good as possible. And we listened to some bands during the sound check, and there was some really good talent there, but we were confident that we were going to, blow everyone else out of the water. And we'd spent weeks working on these or months probably, working on these backing tracks that we had, which Mike, more than me, had made sound really great. He was really into production even at that age, and along with our kind of live parts that we played on the night and our voices over the top, the sound for us, I think, just sounded really big and professional, because I suppose we were kind of semi-cheating. Most of the other bands, they were just playing fully live. We had some nice strings and pads and other things to sort of fill out the sound and make it sound really big, but that kind of led to us sounding a wee bit more pro, I think, at that point than the other acts there, whether or not that was cheating or not, and everyone had brought friends, family, parents, etc., and the crowd was a huge crowd, especially for us at that age. We were only about 15, but there must have been 200 or 300 people there that night. Maybe more than that. I can't think, or maybe it just seems like that in my head. Maybe it just seems like thousands of folk in my head. But there were definitely. It was a packed hall, a big hall, and I had, of course, the butterflies in my stomach the entire day, which only makes the end of the performance even more amazing, because it's almost like you've been in this bungee jump or roller coaster, and there's a huge adrenaline rush where you're like, oh my god, how am I going to get through this? And then you just feel amazing at the end of it. But anyway, before all of that, as we waited to go on, we watched all the other bands, we talked to folk backstage, and at one point this band came on, and I can't remember what they were called. I knew these guys, I knew the band, I knew the guys in the band. I'd kind of been in a band with these guys when we first started high school, so for the first year or so of high school, me and these two guys were drawn to each other through our love of Guns N' Roses and other rock bands. And we sort of formed this friendship, which then ended up with us talking about how we were actually in a band. I don't think we even, maybe we came up with a name, but I don't remember what it would have been. And we never gigged or did anything like of note. We talked about music and talked about who would play what instrument and all that kind of stuff. And I think at the time we all played guitar, so I don't know if 3 guys played guitar. I don't think it would really have worked, but we ended up having this huge fallout. Well, not me and the guy Joe, who was the lead guitarist, Joe McCulloch. So we were like really good pals in first and second year. We had this huge fallout, which resulted in us having this like punch up in the school playground one afternoon in first or second year. I don't think either of us had the guts to actually land a punch on each other's faces. So at 11 or 12 years old, I think it basically involved me and him headlocking each other whilst 100 folk circled round us and shouted instructions on how to beat the other one up and cheering on whichever side they took. And we never spoke to each other after that for years, right to, I think, probably right up until maybe fifth year at high school or whatever. So we hadn't spoken to each other for so long. And these guys had turned up to play as one of the bands. And there was David Crothers, who was the other classmate, who me and him never fell out, but he was kind of really close to Joe, so that was a kind of split. And their singer, who was from another school, I can't remember what school he was from, but he knew Mike, who was in my band, and his name was Craig Stevenson. And so they got up for their half-hour slot, and of course I wanted to see what they were like, really hoping that they were rotten, of course. And Craig starts strumming the acoustic guitar, and he starts to sing this song called "The Drugs Don't Work," and it was brilliant. And I was conflicted because I was really enjoying the track, this beautiful song, this amazing song with these lovely lyrics and the story that's running through it, and the confliction was that, of course, I wanted to hear more of this song. It was great, but I was hating the fact that it was great. I was hating it. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think the other bands wrote much of their own stuff. And here's this band, or this guy, Craig, who's written this absolute belter of a song. And it's just phenomenal. And I had this horrible jealousy in me. I was raging. I was absolutely fuming. I was like, I wish I'd written that song. How have they written such a mature song, at 15 years old? Why did I have to see this just before I went on to sing in front of everybody? So I was raging. But we went on. We played really well. We played a great set. And everybody screamed and applauded in between songs. And probably for the first time in my life, girls wanted to come and chat to me after the gig and hang out with me and Mike backstage. And it felt so cool. We just felt like we'd made it. It was just this daft little kind of, gig in a church hall. But to us, it was like Wembley, and it was a little glimpse into the world of being in a band and playing gigs. It was just awesome, yeah, just amazing. And of course, a couple of weeks later, I don't remember when, but I of course heard "The Drugs Don't Work" on the radio or whatever it was on, and I was like, of course it's not their song. It was like it wasn't. It hadn't been their song, it had been a cover version. They're a very good cover, they did a very good, nice version of it, but the relief was astounding. I couldn't have my ego bruised by other musicians my age writing songs that good. It wasn't allowed. It was okay if it was an established band, adults, but not other guys at 15 years old writing songs as good as that. So thankfully for my ego, that song wasn't written by a peer band, and of course it was written by the Verve, which we'll talk about in a wee second. But there you have it. There's my wee song today. That's why the song's special to me. That's where I was the first time I heard it. Takes me right back to that night with the nerves, the excitement, the jealousy, the arrogance, the falsities with other bands, all of it. Just amazing song, and an amazing time in my life. So that's why the song is special to me. Please leave a comment if it's a special song to you. Let me know why. What does it remind you of? I'll talk a wee bit about the band and the artists, of course, or the singer. The song was written by Richard Ashcroft and released by the Verve in August 2007, became a huge hit. The band had actually been around since 1990, and they had a really impressive sort of underground following. They even had fans like the Gallagher brothers of Oasis, who I think wrote Live Forever for Richard Ashcroft. I think they definitely wrote a song for him. I think it's Live Forever. I might be wrong, but I'm sure there's a song that they wrote and dedicated to Richard Ashcroft. They were like huge fans of the Verve before Oasis made it, and the Verve had written a few albums. They'd released a few studio albums, but they'd never really made it, big, so to speak, until the release of Urban Hymns, the Urban Hymns album, which has Bittersweet Symphony, Lucky Man, Sonnet, and of course today's song, The Drugs Don't Work. It's an amazing album. It wasn't really my type of music at the time when it first came out, so I don't think I ever bought the album. However, it is one of those albums that if you were around in the late 90s, you'll know every song from it. And I think I'd guess that if you were around in the late 90s and you were a teenager at that time or whatever, at least one of the songs on that album will have been the soundtrack to something significant in your life or an event in your life, because the songs were on the radio constantly. I actually always thought the song The Drugs Don't Work was about sort of losing someone who was dying and knowing that the medication wasn't working anymore and that the inevitable was going to happen. Which I kind of always thought that's what the song felt like it was about. But Richard Ashcroft actually said that the song was about his own drug use and how he knew that it wasn't doing him any good, but he still did it. I presume the I know I'll see your face again lyric is him referencing maybe depression or anxiety returning when the drugs wear off. I don't know. That's just me sort of surmising, but I don't know. But it's a great lyric and a great song. Just think it's a great track. As always, I do a wee breakdown of the singer, just a minute long. Richard Ashcroft has a great storyteller's voice. He's not got a particularly impressive range, but he uses what he's got really effectively. He's got an awesome tone, a tone that makes you want to listen to what he's got to say, and a great ability to connect emotionally with the lyrics or the persona of the main character on the song, which is, of course, part of being a great singer. He also has that really nice little huskiness to his voice that makes his sound a little bit more rock and roll than perhaps the arrangements and music of the band The Verve maybe laid down as an accompaniment. They had a kind of indie sound. His voice definitely has got that kind of huskiness that's got that kind of real nice rock and roll quality to it, but a great storyteller's voice, really nice, and still singing well today as far as I've seen and heard on various YouTube videos and things like that. So yeah, thumbs up. So there's today's episode. The Drugs Don't Work by The Verve. As always, I will do my own wee cover version of it for you if you click up here somewhere for part 2. Thanks again for tuning in. If anyone wants to get in touch, a few people have got in touch recently looking for, vocal coaching, that type of thing. Just leave a wee comment underneath and we can organise like a Zoom lesson, Skype lesson, that type of thing if you want to know anything about voice, all things voice. And please tune in again for next week's episode. I was about to say session, but tune in next week, and thanks again for listening.